Okay, welcome back to Cubs on the Mic. I'm your co-host Suvir, and today I'm joined by Christopher Valencia and Andrei Lopez. So, guys, why don't we kick our episode off today by telling everyone what your favorite book, movie, TV show, any form of media really that we think is gonna like that you find maybe influence culture the most.
I mean, me personally, I'm a big anime guy. Like my personal favorite, it's probably between JoJo's Bizarre Adventure and Full Metal Alchemist. But if I were to like objectively look back in the past, some of the most influential movies have definitely been superhero movies. Like, kind of defining what we like our ideal characteristics and what we want of men, women, people in general, like virtues. Chris, you have any opinions?
Yeah, I would agree with what you said with anime. I feel like I do watch quite a bit of anime as well. And to me personally, it would be something like, Attack on Titan. I think it's a classic and many people know about it. And it's just a good story. And going back to what you said about superheroes, I think those movies that we've watched when we were younger about not only superheroes, but just like general stories of that teach us moral lessons really like develop our thoughts when we were younger. I think that's
Yeah,
important.
that's really true. Because if we were exposed to like more morally ambiguous stories like Attack on Titan from a young age, I think our values would definitely look different. Um, our first exposure being superhero movies, I think, is also really influential because it's simple to teach to children. It's widely accepted. But yeah, Chris, I also agree with you on that point about Attack on Titan. Like, I'm gonna say objectively, I think it's the best anime. But
Okay, but Andre, and Chris, why don't you guys try to like? I'm trying to ask you if you can pinpoint it down, like to a favorite, like not just the genre of anime or what, like, and is that your favorite anime then?
Yes.
And then okay, so then okay, you guys will pick anime then as like you pick that as like your favorite.
yeah, I also like I watch some like live action shows. Like I'm a big fan of Breaking Bad, Better Call Saul, that kind of universe because I think the character development's really good. Characters like Jesse Pinkman, he got his own movie with El Camino. I also watched that. I just think it's a masterpiece, man. You can pinpoint any aspect and it's just perfect. I think the setting of Breaking Bad and Better Call Saul encapsulate American society, kind of explain how family dynamics are in American society. And by that, I mean, you don't really have huge families in American society for the most part. It kind of represents the problems that could happen in the typical nuclear household. And that's very different from other cultures. Like, Suvir comes from Indian culture where families are much bigger, and I come from a Latino culture where families are also much bigger, and it kind of represents in a way the isolation. You can see Hank and Walter; they basically only have each other, and um, it also represents like how a man's ego can completely change him. And a lot of other stuff. Jesse Pinkman's loss of innocence, but severe or Chris, do you have any favorite live actions?
Um, well, going back to what you were saying about like an actual show outside of anime, my personal favorite would be probably Dexter. It's about the serial killer called Dexter Morgan, and he experienced a lot of trauma when he was younger. His mother was killed. He witnessed his mother be killed when he was like 3 years old with his brother in a container, and subconsciously in his mind, he grew up with this knowledge and stuff, and it led him to be a psychopath, and he began killing people, not knowing that his origin came from the death of his mother. And so the reason why I like this show is because it looks deeper into the character of Dexter of when he was younger and how unconsciously when he was young he didn't know about these things, right? He grew up, he didn't remember anything about his mother. He was adopted, and then the only thing he remembered were his foster parents, but he never really understood why his parents weren't present in his life. And so I feel like Dexter really analyzes the characteristics of us when we're younger and we don't know what influences our lives sometimes. And we carry these thoughts unconsciously in our minds throughout our journey. And I guess sometimes we try to seek towards the truth and stuff. And so that's why Dexter tried, killing people and finding why was my mother killed and why did I feel this way? And so I feel like to me personally, that's one of my favorite
That
shows.
that's cool, Chris. I feel like that's a really personal story.
Yeah, no, wait. So it seems like to me that you guys both have this what you guys find most attractive in these live action shows is the character development and how they serve as a social commentary on class and certain cultures.
Yeah, for sure.
So do you feel that it's more realistic and more personal when it's in a live action show as opposed to an anime?
Yeah, well, I'm not only talking about class, like I also want to talk about interpersonal relationships and how characters grow up, like real coming of age stories, especially Jesse Pinkman, where he has to face the reality that he is a wanted drug dealer for what he's done. Before we knew him as just a, standard dope slinger, innocent kid who would but he literally turned into a drug lord. And I think that demonstrates a loss of innocence and how you have to grow up as an adult and maybe shoulder the burden of what you've done. But apart from that, I also have another favorite movie. It's more of like a social justice, like realistic movie. It's called Invictus, 2009. Arguably the most influential rugby movie by Clint Eastwood, directed by Clint Eastwood, one of the most famous directors, and stars Morgan Freeman as Nelson Mandela. And it kind of tells the story of how South Africa developed as a country post apartheid and during the revolution again, or the reforms against the apartheid system. And it tells some really interesting stories about how racism can form a society. Yet rugby is kind of that um bridge, that connection between races, and that's something that the entire nation of South Africa is proud of. And I really respect the South African rugby culture. They really work hard, and recently they've been doing pretty good in the World Cup. 2023 they actually won the World Cup, and it tells a really interesting story about culture and how like Nelson Mandela helped lead South Africa into a new age, and rugby is kind of symbolic of how black and white people can stand together.
Yeah, I actually recently started watching a show that's kind of similar to what Andre said about, the bridge of two races. It's this anime called Code Geass, and it's this protagonist who is originally, so basically, it's an anime in Japan, where this union called Britannia has been taking over pretty much the whole world, and Japan has been under control for Britannia for a very long time, and they've been given this name called Elevens, basically discriminating them, and they no longer are called Japanese, and they're seen as less than the Britannians, and so basically the Britannians have taken over Japan, and they basically have all the power and they control everything. And then we have this one character named Lelouch, the main character, and his goal is to basically take over Britannia. And he's originally from the royal blood family. So then this kind of makes you ask the question, why is he fighting against his own country if he's from the royal blood family? Why doesn't he go back? And the reason is because when he was younger, his mother was killed. And so ever since then, he's realized the corruption that Britannia has brought. Even though it's part of his blood, he knows that it's a wrong and that he wants to change. And even though his means of changing aren't necessarily right, his end goal is basically taking over evil with more evil. And we kind of see this character development of when he gets his powers called the Kios, where
Yeah.
he basically kind of control people by making direct eye contact. And so he kind of builds this nation and has this alias, and he names himself Zero in disguise so that people don't know his true identity, that he's actually a prince of the royal blood. And so he's trying to slowly overthrow the government, and he builds the Black Knights, which is this rebellion group that fights evil with evil. And he basically is trying to bring awareness to, look, the Japanese people are being discriminated. I myself am not Japanese, but I want to unite the two nations and live in a world with peace, because I'm trying to bring awareness to this place where there's a lot of discrimination. People are being isolated. Many people are being killed just because they are Japanese. And so I feel like many shows that bring up like race and unite them, I think that's really strong. And so I feel like it kind of relates to our modern world where, as you know, in our modern time, we have to connect each other with races. We can't just isolate other people based on the races. I think that's just very dumb. And we should, like, we're in the end, we're all humans, so we should all unite.
Yeah, Chris, that's a pretty interesting take, but it's kind of safe. Like, do you have any other takeaways from
I mean,
Gias that might be a little bit more
look, this almost sounded like Dexter Part 2. Well, just like in anime form.
Yeah, to me personally, what I like about stories is the character's development and his inner thoughts. He's a very smart person and he likes to think a lot. And so I feel like whenever you read into the character's thoughts, like whenever you can connect to the character, I feel like that really stands out to me. And so going back to when we watch shows about talking character development, I think that's something that really stands out to me. And it's not only the way he like execute things. I'm not justifying his actions, right? But I'm just saying his initial idea of unification is a really strong point. That sometimes we don't want to fight the, you would say like the higher law, you know?
Yeah,
So-
the state, the power regime.
Yeah.
Do you feel like the like Code Geass, right? Is that what it's called?
Yes.
Do you think it's more realistic or less realistic than something like Dexter? Do you think it's more practical? Like, do you think it's more idealistic and fantasizes this like murder more than something like Dexter?
In terms of like things that happen ideologically, I think the killing is more realistic because it shows like war, like in the modern state. Except that the fact that there's robots and stuff, and we don't really have that where we fight war with flying robots. But I think in terms of war, it brings like a bigger point and more into like politics. I think the symbols don't necessarily represent our present world, but the way it's executed is definitely a great representation of our modern world and how war takes place.
Yeah.
For fight.
No, it definitely seems like both of you like these kind of social commentary TV shows and forms of media. Why don't we
Most
yeah,
shows,
sorry, Andrew.
most shows are social commentaries. It's just the depth of which they go. Like you have shows that are clearly meant for entertainment, but when we talk about these shows that we like, I mean, me personally, I just gain the most like value from it. I think there are some shows that are like more deep than others. They're all social commentaries, but for me, I feel like what's like satiates my thirst is being able to go into a story and go deeper, go historical, rather than just raw entertainment. And there's nothing wrong with raw entertainment, but that I think the main value we can get from stories is going deeper. Say, what does it say about myself? How can I see myself through this?
Yeah. Why don't we take a look at books? Why don't you guys tell me what your favorite books are, what you think are like the most transformative books you guys have read?
Well, currently in my English class, we're reading this book called Frankenstein. And so it's about the scientist called Victor Frankenstein. And he had a wonderful childhood. His
Yeah.
parents loved him. He had really nice siblings and stuff, and just beautiful life.
Okay. Wait, Chris, you don't have to get the whole plot every time.
Okay, yeah, sorry. And so basically the main point is that he creates this monster due to his ambition to knowledge. And once he creates him, he's absolutely petrified. He calls him ugly, just absolutely discriminates him and isolates him, and just leaves the monster to be isolated. And so I think this brings back the question about our prejudice on looks. And so I think it relates to our present life. And when we look at somebody on the streets and we say, oh, look, that person looks that certain way, we associate it in our minds to assume that this person might be dangerous or based on their looks pretty much. And so I feel like this book brings up a good point to not judge a book by its cover. Like always, because Victor blames the monster for killing his family, for doing these atrocious actions, but he has no proof. He's just
Yeah.
basing it solely on the fact that he looks a certain way that he's never seen.
Would you say that the monster is kind of a manifestation of his hatred? Because I'm getting some I feel like that's kind of insecure. He started blaming the monster for everything. I mean, that sounds kind of crazy.
I feel like in the book there's a lot of he shows that he has like a lot of issues, especially daddy issues. Like I feel like his father has been present in his life, but he never received the love that he wanted to. And so when he created this monster, it reflects that he isolated him, and it's kind he's kind of projecting the way that he felt with his father.
So is Frankenstein representative of Victor? Like, is Frankenstein Victor in a way?
Yeah, pretty much. In the way that it replays his childhood, how he felt isolated by his own father, how he felt when he was younger, he would look into these like older philosophers, and his father would be like, oh no, that's stupid. Like these guys are way so many years old, and like these facts are fake, and he'd never listen to him.
Because he was a doctor in the book too, right? I just saw the movie, but I've never read the book. So yeah, I mean that probably makes sense why he's trying to be so focused on the present. But do you think that is the most transformative book that you've read, or?
No, I just wanted to bring up a good starting point for us. I feel like it's something that relates to our modern world where we just, kind of prejudice people on their looks.
Yeah. Okay, Andrei.
So I have two picks for like the most influential. I would say not my exactly my personal favorites, but these are two great books that I've read. one, Tattoos on the Heart. So I read this on my own time, and it's a book written by a Loyola alum called Greg Boyle, and it basically tells the story of people from his perspective. It's kind of an autobiography, and it goes in depth of the into the Boyle Heights neighborhood and his like basically building of Homeboy Industries, a service organization meant to rehabilitate gangsters into like having jobs, you know, having there's many homeboy businesses, but it's really interesting because it tells the story of a neighborhood without order, right? Fathers are not present. The gangs are the only form of structure. Religion is not taken. It's not as like ordered. Like there's a lot of killing, a lot of gang violence, and I think that shows how like young men, especially, I think it's an important message to young men, how young men need order in their lives. They need purpose. And finding that purpose, you know, as a Loyola student is difficult. You're gonna go through a lot of challenges, but uh, through his like founding of Homeboy Industries, I think Greg Boyle shows us that God is the answer. God is the way to find purpose, especially for young men. I think, and I'm not specifically limiting it to God, but just the base message that you need a purpose to stop being in such a chaotic world. It's transformative.
You need an ordering force out that separated from our material world.
And our material world is filled with a lot of chaos. It's kind of a godless universe in a way, and that's another philosophical concept that you can tie into Tattoos on the Heart, because a godless universe can be seen as many things. God is the central moral authority. You can also say God is a father. So if you grew up without a father figure, like a lot of the gangsters in these books, I mean in the Tattoos on the Heart book, you lack that moral authority. You lack a lot of things that normal people would. And finding order through that is a very difficult and transformative process. So hearing these gangsters change, hearing Greg Boyle himself and reading about how he built the Homeboy Industries, it's really interesting. And then another one that I did read for class was The Adventures of Huck Finn. I think that book is very transformative because it tells the story of two people in the South that basically emancipated themselves from the assumptions, from the superimposed like assumptions about who they should be according to their class, and they forged their own path basically. Like Jim, he was an escaped slave. He wants to go up to the north, and I think it's just interesting because it talks about a realistic part of American society while also explaining how America is a place where you can build it in your own image. You can find your own opportunity, and that's part of the American dream.
And this is a book you would heavily recommend?
Yeah, I'm not gonna give away too much stuff because at the end there's kind of a plot twist, but
Yeah. Okay. No, these are some pretty good picks you guys have so far. Do you have any like completely unrelated? I know that one wasn't a required reading, but do you have something maybe completely unrelated, nothing to do with Loyola, something that you have just stumbled upon on your own in the world, something somebody maybe recommended to you outside, completely detached?
yeah, I've read a book called, or I've started the book.
This is okay, do you think this is like a transformative book or just like a book you're gonna name?
No, it gives good social commentary. I wouldn't say it's necessarily transformative. It's just kind of the grim reality of the early 1900s America, and the book is called The Jungle. I'd have to look at the author, but I think his name is Upton something, and it's interesting because it tells the story of Latvian immigrants basically coming into early 1900s America, and the story of like the meat packing industry in America, and just raises a lot of social issues and makes us grateful. Gotta look back at the times where there was no workers regulations, and tells the story of immigrants in an important time now, right? An important time now where we see a lot of dehumanizing rhetoric. That's the key takeaway I think that you can get from The Jungle. Also about like modern capitalism and there's obviously a lot of political ideology there, but we're not gonna dive deep into that to not.
Yeah, this episode's gonna run for like 2 hours. Okay, Chris. Yeah.
Yeah, I actually have 2 books that I've read over the summer a few years back, and I've actually found them so super interesting that in my freshman year class I decided to write about them. And so pretty much the first book is The Alchemist. And this book is, I don't really remember the story too well, but basically the plot is about this guy somewhere in, like Egypt, and he's a shepherd and he's searching for a goal. One of his sheep escaped, and so then he goes out in the wild and he's basically exploring the world, and he's given like this, I guess, sign to find treasure. And then through his journey he kind of looks for the treasure, and it's not necessarily only for entertainment, but it's a really deep, nice book that I've recommended to many people, and I've actually had many people read it. And in the end, it ends off with this boy where he goes into a temple, he finds the treasure, and there's nothing. He finds nothing, but he realizes that it's not the end goal that mattered to him. It was the journey. It was the journey of going up the mountains, the winds, everything that he explored. He realized that it's not only the prize that you get, but it's the experience you get along the journey. He was just living his life every day as a shepherd, and he was bored. He had nothing else to do. And so once he found a goal, he found a purpose, like Andre previously mentioned with the book he recommended, that once we have a goal, we could see that we have a whole journey along our path. It's not about doing the same things every day. It's about exploring the world and doing what we want to do.
And Chris, going a little deeper into that, you brought up a good point. I think that you can definitely draw a lot of like religious parallels to that, especially through Christianity and Jesus's concept of voluntary simplicity, where basically as Christians you're called to reject the material world. And it's interesting because that's where young men can get their value from, forgetting about the material and focusing on the immaterial. Like some may say it's living in fantasy, but like in the human brain, it is comforting. It's a comforting thought to know that you've given something up and then you'll be fine in the afterlife. And I think if you live your life through that lens, like you're gonna be safer as a person. I think for your mental health it'll be.
I mean, but isn't that just escapism, Andre?
I mean, it's escapism, but like why would you prefer to live in like the cruel reality?
Because that's reality, Andre. That's like saying, well, there's a digital universe. Why don't I just escape into VR?
Because then what purpose would you have in VR? I'm arguing that the purpose that you find in voluntary simplicity is stronger than trying to find IQ or trying to like use your intelligence and your IQ to find out the reality of the world. I think that the purpose of living your life simply on purpose, like that's more powerful. That's more power. And Jesus gave us that example at a Catholic institution, right?
Okay.
Because there are things you can't buy, and I'm not gonna just make this a standard. Oh, money can't buy happiness. Like, yeah, money definitely can buy you things that'll make you happy, like give you a good financial situation. But having a family, living your life with morals, like these are virtuous things that Jesus and many other cultures have promoted. I think that value is more meaningful.
Yeah. Okay.
I just want to add one more thing. I think going back to the purpose of like, living your life, I remember I actually did a project on Aristotle recently, and he had this idea of eudaimonia. And this idea is basically living your life to the fullest, living your life for a purpose, for a goal. It's not about always being happy, or you realize you do what you need to do, and then you're like, oh, I'm sad. Why do I feel sad? But in the end, it's about feeling content of what you're doing. It's not about your emotions, how you feel every time. You're not always going to feel happy, but it's about living your life to the fullest and doing what you want to achieve your goals.
Fulfillment.
Yeah.
Fulfillment. Okay, so do you guys have any quick closing thoughts?
No, I think we touched on a lot of
Yeah.
important pieces of media and American society and around the world. But so
Okay, thank you for your time today.